3 World Cups. 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 You guys suck. You guys suck. You guys suck.
Complete failure, fallimento totale.
Well, the reason is obvious. Italian Serie A have a very few Italian players.
We have different problems in Italy, but one of that is because we lost our identity.
Pozzo, ma l'addoppio successo del commissario tecnico degli anni 30.
We have a lot of, nothing against anybody. Of course, we want foreign people to come and see our beautiful country, but in so many years, you know, foreign, and
When
then...
his shot hit the back of the net, Tardelli went into ecstasy, running as if he would never stop.
What I could see is the most likely reform, there needs to be a player quota which restricts the number of foreigners that play in a match in Serie A.
Che ha coinvolto 37 nazioni.
What can say? Like, the system is rotten, completely rotten, you know? Like, not going to the World Cup 3 times in a row, Sweden, North Macedonia and Bosnia. What else can I say?
In April 2026, Gabriel Gravina faced the press after Italy missed a 3rd consecutive World Cup, losing to Bosnia and Herzegovina. This felt different from 2022. It was no longer a setback, but evidence of a deeper failure. Gravina, who had overseen both Euro 2020 and repeated collapse, looked less like the author of one mistake than the face of a system that could still produce isolated success, but no longer seemed capable of reproducing them. Within days, Gravina had resigned. What happened outside the Federation building was almost as important as what happened within it. A group of disgruntled young people gathered and threw eggs at the FIGC building in Rome. A trivial act on one level and a revealing one on another. Because eggs do not break institutions, but they do mark it, ridicule it, and reduce it. The target was not the players or even the coaches, it was the Federation itself, and that distinction matters. The failure was no longer understood as a problem of form or luck or one generation of players. It was systemic. The language that gathered around that moment was familiar, and it moved quickly from performance to identity. Too many foreign players, not enough Italians. Something national had been lost. In the Italy of Giorgia Meloni, debates about nation and belonging already shaped public life. Football simply echoed the wider mood. In moments of uncertainty, both politics and football turn instinctively inward toward identity. But we've been here before. For over a century, Italian football has been through moments like this. And each and every one of them has been about more than just football. They've been about identity, structures, what the country believes itself to be. And each and every one of those crises has led to change, sometimes by force, sometimes by instinct, sometimes by design, but always in response to failure. And that change hasn't necessarily meant collapse. On the contrary, it has often meant renewal, revival, and glorious return. And that begs the question whether this Italy can do the same. To answer that question, and to fully understand what the language we've previously discussed is searching for, we have to go back to 1925, back to the beginnings of Mussolini's Italy, back to where Italian football was first remade. On a humid afternoon in the summer of 1925, in a Genoese football ground, ringed by wooden stands and crowded terraces. Thousands of men were packed shoulder to shoulder beneath the northern Italian sun, their jackets slung over their arms, their collars dark with sweat, their attention fixed on a patch of worn grass where the championship was to be decided. The season had already run far beyond its natural end. Matches had been replayed, arguments renewed, accusations traded from one city to another, and still no conclusion had been reached. Bologna and Genoa had been chasing the title for weeks, and here, at last, was a chance to settle the matter. Near the Genoa box, the ball broke loose in the scramble of boots and dust. A shot was struck. The goalkeeper tipped it round the post. The referee, Giovanni Mauro, raised his arm and pointed for a corner. It was an ordinary decision. But in certain moments, ordinary decisions carry extraordinary weight. There was first a murmur, then an angered roar, the movement in the crowd itself. Bolognese men climbed the barriers. The line between terrace and touchline, between spectator and participant, dissolved with surprising speed. Players shouted in different dialects. Officials gestured helplessly as the throng surrounded the referee. Mauro was one of the most senior figures in the Italian game. A lawyer, a former player, a man accustomed to command. Yet now he found himself hemmed in by bodies and voices, his authority reduced to the thin metal whistle in his hand. Around him surged supporters, officials, and black-shirted fascists who understood instinctively that power belonged only to whoever could impose it. When play resumed, the decision had changed. A Bologna goal was given. Genoa refused to continue. The championship dragged on through further replays, station fights, gunshots, closed-door matches and national scandal. But the essential truth had already been revealed that afternoon. Italy, more than 60 years after unification, remained a country of regions, loyalties and competing authorities. Its football was no different. Divided, improvised, vulnerable to pressure, and incapable of governing itself. And what happened next would transform both game and country forever. Benito Mussolini had come to power in 1922 and soon began remaking Italy with impatience for delay and contempt for compromise. The country was to be disciplined, unified and obedient. A new Italian would be forged, modern, war-ready and loyal to something larger than himself. In 1926, the state turned to football. The same principles imposed across Italian society of hierarchy, discipline, central control, subordination of local interest to national purpose were brought into the game. Football, you see, offered the regime a public stage for power to be displayed, success to be measured, and the embodied ideals of the new fascist man exhibited in flesh and blood for Italy and the world to see. Under the Duce's direction, in the Tuscan seaside town of Viareggio, officials and regime loyalists drafted into law the new order of Italian football. The Viareggio Charter did not simply amend the existing system, it replaced it. Regional divisions gave way to a national structure, professionalism was recognized, foreign players were banned and authority centralized. What had once been governed by Italy's sporting men was brought steadily inward, away from the margins and toward the center, until control of the game sat, like so much else in fascist Italy, at the heart of the state itself. The impact was immediate and unmistakable. A new and true national championship, the future Serie A, gave clubs stability and raised standards, allowing Italian teams to compete internationally with new consistency and success. Under the legend Vittorio Pozzo, the national team embodied that success by achieving a sequence of victories. World Cup wins in 1934 and 1938, Olympic gold in 1936 that unequivocally confirmed Italy's position at the top of the game. Several of Italy's most important stadiums were either built, rebuilt, or fundamentally shaped during the fascist era. They were civic monuments as much as sports venues, designed to project modernity, discipline, and national prestige. The most striking surviving example being the San Siro. In the words of John Foot, fascism was good for football, and football was good for fascism. By 1938, Italy stood as the strongest team in the world. Yet the true significance of that supremacy lay not in the trophies themselves, but in the machinery that had produced them. This was not an organic ascent patiently grown from the habits of clubs and the freedom of civic life, but a success engineered from above, accelerated by state intervention, disciplined by central command, and harnessed to political purpose. The victories were real, the quality undeniable, the dominance extraordinary. But they were inseparable from the regime that had reordered the game in its own image. Before Italy conquered world football, football itself had been conscripted into the service of power. It began as so much in Italy did in those days. Not in a stadium, but in a car. On the morning of March the 16th, 1978, Aldo Moro, former Prime Minister and one of the post-war Italy's most important politicians, was travelling through Rome when his convoy was ambushed at Via Fani. Within seconds, 5 members of his escort were dead, and Moro was pulled from the wreckage by armed men who disappeared as quickly as they had arrived. What remained felt less like a crime than the opening act of a war already begun. For 55 days, Italy waited. Moro was held by the Red Brigade, a far-left militant group who believed that they were fighting a revolutionary war against the Italian state. They issued demands, communiques, and photographs, proof of life, then proof of suffering, while a divided government refused to negotiate, insisting that to do so would mean surrendering the authority of the state. When Moro's body was found in the boot of a red Renault in central Rome, deliberately placed between the headquarters of the Christian Democrats and the Communists, the message was unmistakable. The political centre could not hold. But this was not an isolated moment. It belonged to an era of instability called the Years of Lead. From the late 1960s into the 1980s, political violence became a constant in everyday Italian life. Groups on both the far left and the far right believed that the existing government was illegitimate and that violence was necessary to reshape it. The far left, represented by organisations like the Red Brigade, targeted individuals, politicians, judges, industrialists, through kidnapping and assassinations, hoping to provoke a revolutionary crisis. The far right often pursued what became known as a strategy of tension, bombings in banks, stations and trains, designed to spread fear, destabilise society and push the country towards authoritarian solutions. Between these forces stood the Italian state, fragmented, mistrusted, and unable to impose order. Ordinary life continued, but under the constant awareness that violence could erupt at anywhere and at any time. And it is here that football returns, not as an escape from that reality, but as one of the clearest places in which that reality can be seen, because in Italy, football was never merely entertainment. It belonged to the same civic fabric, the same cities, institutions, rivalries and tensions. The instability of the country expressed itself there too. Sometimes the connection was almost surreal. During the search for Moro, as police followed leads across Rome, a helicopter landed unexpectedly on a school football pitch on the outskirts of the city. scattering players and spectators as officers stepped out to ask directions to a suspected hideout. It was an image that captured the period perfectly. Nowhere, not even a football pitch, felt separate from the events beyond it. The national team of the 1970s reflected the country it represented too. It seemed caught between identities, talented, capable of moments of quality, but unable to sustain coherence. There were still great players and flashes of the discipline that had once defined Italy, but no clear direction, no sense of what the Azzurri was supposed to be. And that uncertainty mirrored a broader national uncertainty about what Italy itself was becoming. Even success, when it came, felt provisional. The side that reached the 1970 World Cup final and the teams that followed through the decade remained competitive and gifted, but never fully convincing, as though something deeper, something structural, remained unresolved. So when violence returned in a form that could no longer be absorbed into the background, it felt less like escalation than confirmation. In August 1980, a bomb exploded in the crowded waiting room at Bologna station, killing 85 people and injuring more than 200. It was one of the deadliest attacks in modern Italian history, and it crystallized the scale of what the country had endured for more than a decade. Bologna was not an abstract symbol. It was a real city with its own identity, rhythms, and iconic football club. Like so many Italian cities, its civic life and football were inseparable. And the bombing did not simply interrupt normal life, it shattered, beyond measure, the belief that normal life could continue untouched. And it's from that rupture that the next moment must be understood. 2 years later, in 1982, Italy won the World Cup. It is tempting to treat that victory as only a sporting achievement, the product of tactics, preparation and players, but that misses what it meant to the country that had produced it. By 1982, Italy was emerging, unevenly, imperfectly, from the years of lead. Under Enzo Berzot, the national team reflected that moment in ways that went way beyond football. The squad was insular, defensive, mistrustful of the press, and reliant on internal cohesion rather than outside approval. And in that sense, it resembled a country that had learned, through years of violence, to trust only what it could control. And yet something else emerged within that structure too. In the final against West Germany, there was a moment, brief, explosive, unforgettable, iconic, where everything that had been contained seemed to break free. Marco Tardelli ran away from goal, his face contorted, his arms outstretched, shouting not in celebration alone, but in something closer to release, a physical expression of emotion that felt disproportionate to a single goal, but entirely proportionate to what it represented. In the stands, the Italian president, Sandro Pertini, a former partisan and anti-fascist, celebrated openly, embodying a different Italy from the rigid, performative one of the 1930s. This was not the choreographed triumph of a regime. It was something looser, more human, less controlled. Italy had not solved its problems. The years of lead did not end cleanly, nor did the weakness of the state disappear overnight. But for a moment, through football, the country saw an image of itself that felt coherent again. Not imposed from above, not built for propaganda, but emerging from within. And that, more than the result itself, gave 1982 its power. Because in a country that had spent more than a decade unsure of itself, unsure of its institutions, unsure of its future, football provided something that politics no longer could. A sense, however fleeting, that Italy still existed as a single, recognizable whole.
in so many years, 4-4-4, and then the national team suffers, and then you like a country like Italy who've been on every Mondial. Okay, the last couple you had issues, but before that, you were always on the top and everything, and then you just went down, unfortunately.
What that language gives us is not so much a solution as a substitution, because Italian football's deep-rooted problems did not start with who is on the pitch, nor can they be resolved by counting those people who were born elsewhere, or indeed those people whose parents were born elsewhere. The problems lie in a misalignment with the system itself, in the incentives that push clubs towards short-term survival rather than long-term development, in the fragmentation of authority between institutions that understood the need for reform, but cannot or will not enforce it, and in a culture that continues to value control, even as the game increasingly rewards risk. And that contradiction becomes most clear in the one area where Italy unmistakably continues to produce excellence: coaching. Italian managers remain in demand across the world, and at the upcoming World Cup, 3 national teams will be led by Italian coaches. A reminder that the intellectual tradition of Italian football, its tactical literacy, its attention to detail, its ability to organise space, has not disappeared. Yet 2 of Italy's most innovative managerial figures, Roberto De Zerbi and Francesco Farioli, built their reputations largely abroad, in environments more open and encouraging of their ideas. Neither is rejected outright. Indeed, both are admired at home, but neither feels entirely comfortable in the domestic game either. And that in itself is revealing. Because within Italy itself, the game always seems to circle back towards what it already knows. The league remains tactically conservative, structurally repetitive, dominated by familiar shapes, familiar rhythms, and a shared understanding of risk that privileges caution over invention. It's not that Serie A lacks quality, it's that it often lacks variation. There are exceptions, of course. At Como, under Cesc Fabregas, a more modern model has emerged. Though even there, the link between club success and domestic player development remains uncertain. The contrast with other sports is striking. Yannick Sinner is becoming one of the defining players of his generation, and in F1, young Kimi Antonelli is thriving. Even rugby, long peripheral in the Italian imagination, has begun to produce results that suggest a clearer alignment between structure and ambition. Football alone seems unable to convert national knowledge, passion, talent, and expertise into domestic coherence and international success. What at first glance looks like decline may more precisely be described as drift. Not the collapse of a system, but its gradual misalignment. Not the absence of talent, but the failure to organize it. Not the absence of ideas, but the inability to decide which ideas to follow. In 1926, disorder was answered by imposed order. In 1982, instability was answered with a fleeting but powerful experience of unity. In 2026, the response is less certain, and perhaps for that reason, all the more revealing. Faced with stagnation, Italy turns not first towards structural reinvention, but toward identity, toward the reassurance of tradition, the language of belonging, the idea that what has been lost can be recovered somehow by defining more clearly what it is to be Italian. That is why the eggs matter. They are small, theatrical, almost absurd, but they are precise. And they show us that football, once again, is one of the places where Italy continues to argue with itself. Not only about how to win, but about who it really is and who it is for, and whether the future can be built by returning to something that feels, however loosely, like the past. And in that argument as before, football does not stand apart from the country. It reveals and reflects it. The only question now is what Italy sees when it looks back at itself.